Hey, I'm Decathlon Gamer, and welcome to a different type of review than I've ever done before. I used to always do a weekly review, and I still provide those now over on Twitter. Occasionally, I'll miss a week, but out of 52 weeks in a year, I'll probably get through 40 to 45 of those weekly reviews. And then I always have my yearly review with awards and things like that. It was proposed a while back that I do something here that has a bit more of a deep dive look to it. And I said, you know what? Sure, why not? And here I am a month and a half later, finally going, okay, well, you know what? Let's do it. I would like for it to be a monthly thing, but life happens, get busy. It's hard to put out extra content. It's hard to put extra content together when you're already maintaining a pretty busy schedule as is. Deadlines, a little easier to push for and make happen. Without setting myself to maybe a month at a time, I would like to get them out at least periodically, once every 6 weeks or so. But for this first ever deep dive into how things are progressing on the channel, there can be various topics for this one. There can be life topics, there can be channel updates. I think they're great for this platform. Uh, for now, we're going to go with a little bit of both, but specifically what it is I do on the channel, at least how the channel started. When I first came up with the concept, what I wanted to be unique about the channel was the decathlon portion from which I derived my name. The decathlon, of course, is an Olympic event. It's been around for a long time. It's the male version. It's the heptathlon for the women, but the decathlon is 10 events, track and field event. Each one has a score relative to 1,000. It's not exact. It's not an exact science. It's not just exactly a perfect score as 1,000, but relatively close to 1,000 would be an ideal score. And you do that times 10 events over the course of a couple of days of a track and field competition, and you add that all together, and you are aiming for the best score of anyone. And when you do it, you're not competing directly head to head against the others. You're competing against the best all time within those events. You are competing to better yourself. So your score is not simply where you ranked. Let's say there's a 100-meter sprint. That's one of the 10 events. And let's say overall, out of all the competitors, you had the fifth quickest time. You don't get fifth place points for that like you do in most other series. If you were in a race, you would get points based on fifth place. But if you, in fifth place, were a minute behind the fourth place car and the front four were nose to tail with each other, with everybody up in the gearbox of the car ahead of them, but you're in fifth place a minute down, you still get fifth place points, and the fourth place car ahead of you still get fourth place points, and you end up with a rather close finish in terms of how that championship standings work, and you barely lose ground on that car ahead of you, even though they were a minute up the road. The way the decathlon works is you're going against the best score, the best expected time. So whoever won that race, let's say that they were relatively close to setting the record, and they had a really, really good outcome. Well, they're going to have a good score, and those three just behind them are going to have just slightly less. Now, of course, it's out of 1,000. If you got 950, one of them less than a second behind is going to have 945 or 946, and so on and so forth through those first few, to where there's less than 15 points separating those four who finished first, second, third, fourth. But you, a minute down, even though you finish ahead of everybody else, you're going to have significantly less points. And instead of being at 950 down to about 935, you got 870. And that's how the decathlon works in terms of its scoring. Now, it is more complex, but at a basic level, that's pretty accurate to how the decathlon works. Now, I came up with the concept of doing something similar in terms of gaming. And when I did first launch the channel, I did play 10 games, but that would take me a full week to get through 10 games with one episode to each series on a weekly basis. Started very, very small, no audience. I didn't tell people that I knew. I wasn't trying to brag. I wasn't trying to get attention. I just, something I enjoyed doing, and I wanted to put out something unique and try something. Funny thing, how I started the channel. Here you go. Here's a reason to tune into these, because you're going to get interesting stories and background things that you're not going to get in normal content. When I started the channel, one of the reasons why I started it was I had time. I had time on my hands. I had just finished the process of the business that most of you know that I have, a daycare that I am the owner and director of. When my wife and I had the decision to start the business, I started that process the moment the final year of teaching that I was doing, the moment the year ended. I got to work on it, and I spent months putting things together while my wife continued working, and then I finished. I had everything done. I had everything that the state required, that the licensing department required, formalized the business, but we were still waiting. We were still waiting for clearance to open, and I had time. In fact, I had about 3 months before we actually opened as a business, and then determining what it was my role was going to be once we opened. Well, I knew I was going to have some time. I wasn't going to be working 40 hours a week on it. So with my free time, I sat down, I got bored, and decided, hey, I want to do something and not just sit around and play games, but sit around and play games to some means, some ends, some purpose. And that was when I came up with the concept for the channel and the 10 games. Now, I've gotten away from the 10 games, and actually the idea, the concept, the original purpose, I've concluded. I have beaten the all-time world record of the Decathlon. Having exceeded that with 10 games, there was no point carrying on in that direct manner. But it hasn't changed me from continually trying to achieve the best scores that I can amongst games. And just recently, just this month, I cracked the top 10 of games for the first time in a long time. I had some games that had easier objectives, I think, in the past. Easier to achieve, easier to do. Difficulty levels not as hard. These days, I really try to challenge myself more and more and more intentionally. Because for me, and I think for many of you, it's definitely better viewing when there's a serious challenge, and building over the long haul to achieve said challenge is worthy. Let's start with the first topic of the current month or month and a half that we just finished up, and we'll begin discussing F1 Manager. So F1 Manager, if you haven't seen the series, I've taken the Williams F1 team, which had finished 9th the year before and was picked for 10th for this season. And I do believe in real life they did finish 10th, but maybe not. They might have been a position or two above that. The Williams team in game was absolutely pegged as 10th best team. And I've been taking Williams and building up from no facilities, from a weak set of drivers, a weak set of staff, and a very low budget. And over the course of now 4 and going on 5 seasons, 4.5 seasons now, have built them up to one of the best on the grid. It's taken a long time. It's been a hard process. And right now, major thing holding me back is my young drivers. How error prone they are. But we've made a lot of progress. I've got one good staff member. Otherwise, I kept the same staff members and just developed them. I did change over to 2 young drivers. They're growing, they're changing, they're getting better. They're up to an 80 overall rating, where there are drivers that are in the low 90s, and so we are definitely a bit weaker. Progression of young riders is a bit too slow in this game. I would hope that in F1 Manager 23 they would change that just a little bit. It's a common complaint that young riders take many seasons. We've had Pourchaire for 4 years now, and Pourchaire still has only gone from a 70 or 71 overall to an 80 in 4 years. He should be a long-standing veteran, easily at 83, 84 by this point, maybe even an 85, with the kind of potential that he had. And yes, be slowing down on the progression at this point, but his progression early should have been significantly higher and better than what it has been. So there is that factor. But speaking of challenges, I could easily go out. Lewis Hamilton's available. He has not retired, and he is not with the team. We could sign him on a free and have the arguably best driver of all time racing for us, winning probably 15, 16 races a season with how good we have the car right now, which is probably second best, but we're talking about less than a tenth of a second off the best car. Tactically, it's not that hard to beat the other cars. When you're not competitive, yes, it's hard to catch up to them when they are that much faster. But when you are only a tenth or two off, it's very easy to beat other cars. Drivers are very, very mistake prone in the game in general. Probably a little more often, a little bit, not by a lot, but a little bit more often than real life. And with two young drivers who are error prone. We won a race last month in which there were 5 mistakes from our 2 drivers, but we still managed to get the win. The second driver barely finished in the points after 3 mistakes. Or did he finish in the points at all? I think he did. But we did still manage to win. But that was despite 2 errors. And that was barely. We would have won comfortably if not for the errors. And we can't seem to go a race without at least one of the drivers having an error these days. But that's the challenge. And that's why we haven't won yet. And that's why the series endures and goes on instead of already being a done deal, having won by the 3rd or 4th season, because you go make a decent car, hire the best staff, and then hire the best drivers, and then it's all too easy when you take that route. Taking the route we have, sticking with what we have, and getting younger and taking ultimately weaker drivers with high potential and a slow growth rate within the game and trying to develop them. Here's the results, right? Here's what we get, what we see out of that, and it makes it a better long-term challenge. And that's what I aim for with the channel. Now let's go ahead and talk about the other games. Let's get into the 2 that are no longer with us, the 2 that we finished up over the last month. First off, long-standing PCM 22 series, the Classics Puncher. That was actually really disappointing for me as a series. The profile of a Classics Puncher has a lot of potential to be like Wout van Aert or Mathieu van der Poel. Our rider came out nothing like those 2. And it was quite disappointing because we had a terrible mountain rating. It wouldn't give us anything for mountain, even though we had potential. We had potential to be decent. We had potential to be Mathieu van der Poel level. Not Wout van Aert level, but we had potential to be Mathieu van der Poel level as a climber. To be better than him as a cobble rider and to be similar to him as a puncher. It was very much Mathieu van der Poel profile that we were in the shape of, in the mold of. But development-wise, the Classics part came on strong. The sprint capability came on pretty strong. Punchiness came up well short, and the mountain part was abysmal. It just did not develop at all. We won some races. We did okay, but ultimately a score of 539 is all we managed out of 1,000. It was one of the weaker series that I've had, and I was happily able to move on to the Dragon series that we'll talk about shortly. But Vicky 3 also finished up this month. It was exciting. It was fun. I would love to still be playing it. For me, that was my personal enjoyment and not just focused on you as an audience. I played that one for myself and was just happy to share it. In the end, I took the USA in the final campaign and got all the way up to number 2 in the rankings, which was shocking that we weren't number 1 because we were so much stronger, so much more powerful, so much better than Austria in almost every single way. They had a better standard of living, but for whatever reason, they had prestige just flowing out their ears, out their eyes, out their nostrils, out their mouth. I mean, it was just everywhere. It seemed a bit undeserved because, like I said, we were stronger than them at everything except for standard of living. We had 3 times the territory. We had twice the population, we had twice the GDP. We were successful in countless ways comparatively. A little bit weaker in standard of living, and yet they had more prestige by a comfortable margin than we did. And we had completed the entire tech tree. And so all the prestige bonuses were already applied. So they couldn't have additional prestige bonuses that we didn't have unless it came from events. That's the only way that they possibly had finished ahead of us. We were the strongest in the world. We were a few provinces, a few states away from conquering the entirety of the Americas. North, Central, South America, 100% ours. It was a really fun campaign, and we spread a ways beyond that too. A ways into Africa, a ways into Oceania and Southeast Asia and East Asia. We certainly made progress. Painting the map one color, a total world domination, I'm not sure if it's completely possible in that game, but it might be. I mean, USA is not an easy start because you're starting pre-Civil War and you're facing that adversity early on. You have no military at the beginning. You have a fairly small economy. You have plenty of potential for growth, and it certainly helps the USA, but it's not a top nation at the beginning by any stretch, and so it takes a while just to make the US what it is now, the 50 states. It takes a long while just to get to that. So it's not just taking a current US and going out and trying to dominate the world. It's taking a then and long process. But scoring wise, we were close to maxing out score in most departments, and that's why it was able to crack the top 10. One of the only weaker ones was that standard of living didn't quite get where you would want it to be, but realistically, getting it up to a 20, 21, 22 would have only changed our score marginally, and so I focused on other areas. The top game of the period that's still ongoing is the career mode for PCM 22, and that one's going strong. We're in our 6th season. Our only issue beyond recruitment limitations placed on by the challenge itself is that I only have so much in terms of finances. We are continually losing our best riders year after year. Find great new ones, and as a team we're getting slowly stronger and stronger, and the finances slowly get better and better, so we are able to retain more and more of them. The reality is the best of the best riders that we have, every year we lose. We lost the 2 best riders this last year. It's always difficult to replace, but we do. We replace them, and we continually compete at a strong level. We ended up finishing number 1 this last season in terms of the Super Prestige. It is quite possible to get 10,000 in that game, but that is not only being the best, number 1, because we were number 1 this last season, but that only got us to 841, as in 8,410 last digit would have been. That's still 1,600 points shy of a perfect score. But I've done it. I mean, if you look at my all-time best, all of them are PCM. The top 3 are all PCM, and all 3 of them have achieved that perfect score. Now, in terms of career, well, the Champions Series did quite easily get there. In terms of career modes, 964 is the highest career mode score that I've had. The individual one, the Pro Cyclist mode, or in this case the Classics Puncher one that I have, is a little bit easier to get a maximum score on, but only just, and even then it requires you to get 50% of your team's entire score for the year, and you participate in 15-20% of the races is all. So it's hard to get 50% of the score of your team, and for that one I take the individual Super Prestige, and instead of dividing by 10 I divide it by 5. The new series is Dragons. Scoring wise it's the same way, but the challenge very different. In this one we are trying to develop scouting of Asia. I have a very intent focus on that series, a real goal there that doesn't necessarily coalesce with the Super Prestige goal, but it does overlap enough that I'm keeping the scoring the same as I do for all of the series. But I'm really excited by this series, and most of you audience wise seem to be very excited by it as well. It's the most engaged the audience has ever been in terms of comments, in terms of likes, in terms of viewership. It's not the most watched series I've ever had, but it's up there. And for being mid-year release for a game, it's incredible to have the support that I'm getting within that series. And we're only 10 episodes in, and it just started over this stretch. So it was just a new one a few weeks ago. If you have not checked it out yet, please do so, because it is a very, very popular series on the channel at this stage, where I am trying to raise the profile of an entire continent, Asia, and the weak development of writers, the youth intakes that you have of writers within Asia. And I'm trying to raise that up. It's a challenge. And we're already in season 4, just 10 episodes in for now, pushing really fast until we get into a state where we can start impacting and changing the way that the development of young writers actually takes place. The last series to talk about for this month was the FM23 Newton Heath series. So in Football Manager, it's another one that I've been playing for a long time. It was one of the original games when I started. Pro Cycling Manager was also one of the original games. And while we've moved on to F1 Manager, originally Motorsport Manager was one of the first games that I started on the channel. So there is some overlap in how that has gone. But Newton Heath is a series that's both easy and hard. It comes with its challenges and it comes with its advantage. The advantage was that, well, first off, the Newton Heath part is a connection to Manchester United as a protest club, but we started up a 6th tier English team in the Vanarama National North. This team has perfect stadium, the exact same stadium that Manchester United have, Old Trafford. We have New Trafford, same capacity, and we fill it out. So we have a full stadium, but we started with no money. We started with 0 players. We started with no staff. We started with a reputation of 1. We started with training facilities, youth facilities, all of it at blank, nothing, or 1s, the minimum possible. The reputation of 1 is out of 10,000. It took a little while. We had to survive that first year. We had to pull together a team. We did. We survived the drop. In fact, we finished mid-table. Took a couple of years to build us up, but we got promoted to the 5th tier. Over this last month, we got promoted to 4th tier. Now in League 2, with a growing reputation, but still less than what everybody else has. In fact, we had only passed the last team in the 6th tier at the start of this season, though we're up in the 4th tier now. But we're just starting to catch up in terms of reputation from 0 to tail end of tier 6. I'm hoping that this season we're going to get higher, but signings, we have money because of that stadium. Finances are really good, and we've been growing facilities and things like that, but succeeding when nobody necessarily wants to sign for you, the good staff, the good players, they don't want to play for a team with bad reputation. Once that does catch up, it's going to make things easier, but catching up is hard to do when you're trying to continually get promoted. You have to really stabilize for a number of years in a level, in a tier, to see that reputation grow and actually catch up to those around you. It's like we keep staying ahead of the reputation growth as we continue to promote. So it's been tricky to do, and it does keep the challenge interesting, even though part of it is easy, part of it's hard. That's my first deep dive into how things are progressing, how the games are progressing on the channel, and I'm not sure when the next one will be. Maybe in, well, I'd say in 6 weeks, but in 6 weeks I'm going to be halfway around the world. I'm going to be taking a 2-week vacation with my wife. She is from the Philippines, and we are going to be returning there. Last time we were there was 10 years ago now. And so we're going to go spend a couple of weeks with her family, travel around the Philippines a bit. So I'm excited to be doing that because, like I said, it's been a while. I will still have some content out during that time. It'll be pre-recorded. It won't be the usual amount. I'll try to spread it out through that period. And then when I get back, I'll, put my head down and get some work done again. That's also, I get back at like 11:45 at night, p.m. and track. I'm track head coach, and the track season starts the next day after I return. So I'll have to juggle that as well, but we'll get caught up on that content. So things will be a little bit light, but that's still over a month away. I'm Decathlon Gamer. Thanks for tuning in. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Have a good one. Be safe out there, and bye for now.